from Fox Sports and The Athletic. Bruce Feldman back here in our Rich Eisen Show studio. Were you surprised at how tight the final Heisman voting was, Bruce Feldman?
I actually was. For me, thought it was a clear Travis Hunter, then Genty. I mean, Genty had an amazing year, but Travis Hunter was generational, what he did. I mean, I thought Ashton Genty was one of the, best running backs of the last decade. Nobody was like Travis Hunter, though. I mean, you can say, yeah, Charles Woodson was phenomenal, what he did. Charles dabbled on offense. Champ Bailey dabbled on offense. Like, Travis Hunter was arguably as good as any receiver in college football and was probably better than any DB. So to me, I thought it was clear, but it was much closer than I expected it to be in the voting.
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about wide receivers. He's a Biletnikoff finalist in terms of one of the best wide receivers in the game. He doesn't just dabble. I mean, he is a crucial part of the Colorado offense.
I think the thing that happened, though, Rich, was Ashton Genty played on the final weekend, and Travis Hunter in Colorado didn't.
Right.
So there was some recency factor that went in, and Ashton Genty was spectacular all year round,
right,
or all season. So I think that probably played into him getting a voting push the last weekend.
What are you hearing about, speaking of Colorado, Shedeur Sanders? Is he the number one overall pick in the NFL draft? What is the general sense of you and your colleagues and what you're hearing from those in the college level about that?
I think right now he's probably the one that people have the most confidence in as a quarterback. It's him and Cam Ward. I don't know if anybody looks at them and say, hey, they are first pick of the draft guys. But quarterbacks, as you know, go higher, especially in this case.
Right.
So it depends on need. Those are the two guys people look at and go, okay, I don't know if they're a top 10 pick, like value-wise, but it wouldn't shock me if either one went in the top 3.
Right, but when you've got the Giants sitting there at number 1 overall and the Raiders sitting there at number 2 overall, it'd be tough to sit here and say we don't see Sanders and Cam Ward go 1-2. It's just the question is the order of events. He would love that over there for the Patriots sitting there at 3. So if that means Travis Hunter would drop straight into Gerard Mayo's lap, I mean, that would be as quick as writing out a name on a card as we've seen in some time for a non-quarterback in the NFL. That's for sure.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a great quarterback class overall. I think it will be interesting to see what happens. Does somebody, does Drew Aller go off in the playoff? And I know he said he's going to come back. Is there somebody who, Quinn Ewers right now, from everything I've heard, does not have like a top 50 grade on him? There's talk about him maybe going in the portal because Arch is obviously there and they waited patiently with him. Ewers' dynamic is really interesting right now because he certainly has the talent around him. They came close to playing in the national title game last year. We've seen some really good from him. We've seen some not so good from him. What does he do in this playoff? Because they're a legit, national title contender. If he plays, 3 great games, does he play himself into that discussion? I mean, he's got a really good arm. He's played a lot. And there's questions about durability because he hasn't played a whole season where he's been able to stay healthy. And there's, but there could be somebody in this playoff who plays themselves into the top 10. I'm sure there will be, but there might be a quarterback who does that.
I've got Bruce Feldman from Fox Sports and The Athletic here on the Rich Eisen Show. Let's start breaking down some of these college football playoff games that we're going to see here this weekend, starting with Texas and Clemson. We had Sark on the program last week and asked him about playing Arch Moore and the significance of his role that could be expanded more. He really wasn't going to countenance that question very much, but what do you think? I mean, when the SEC championship's on the line and the game's in overtime and Texas gets the ball first, the quarterback who took the first snap of overtime was Arch Manning. And I saw that, and I'm like, okay, so if they're confident enough to pop him out for one of the most important snaps of the season, why aren't we going to maybe see that a little bit more? Certainly if Ewers is a shade slower due to wear and tear. Your thoughts on that subject matter, Bruce Feldman? I
think it's a hard thing to do where you're kind of messing with the psyche of your starting quarterback and the guy who's supposed to be a leader of your team in this, at this point of it, because it's different than having, okay, we have a package for Arch to go in, as opposed to I think you can't play in both lanes. I just think it kind of undermines Ewers to some degree because, look, he played really well against Michigan on the road.
Right.
And they were rolling, and then he got banged up. He got hurt. He missed a couple games. Arch did some really good things. And then Ewers came back, and he hasn't been as sharp, right? And as you said, but I think Sark has basically said he is our guy. He said it, and you can say, okay, well, he's given Arch some opportunities here in big moments.
Right.
I think that's different than saying, hey, that's we're going to play it as we see it.
But I mean, if you're saying in a draft conversation that Ewers and his family and his entourage, his circle, might be looking at his draft status right now, and if it's not improved, he might stick in college football and knows Texas isn't the spot for him. If he's already thinking portal, why wouldn't Sark say, let's get Arch a little bit more action right now? Certainly, since we're now in rubber meets the road situation where, psyches are important and obviously loyalty is another thing, but you gotta beat Clemson and then move on into the next round when somebody who's fresh as a daisy is taking on your team. You got to sit here and think about, there's no sacred cows a little bit, right?
Yeah, but I don't think necessarily Ewers is thinking I'm going in the portal.
Okay.
I think Ewers is thinking I'm going to play really well. I'll get the ball to my really talented skill guys, and I'm going to lead this team to a national title. And then whatever happens, happens. Whether I end up, people say I'm going to be a first round pick or not, we'll evaluate it then. Because I think Quinn Ewers has been coached enough, and I'm not just talking about Sark, but has had enough people around him to know if I play really well and if I'm at my best, let me take my chances at that. I don't think if Sark really felt like that, I think he would have ripped the Band-Aid off a long time ago. Sark is around them all the time. I mean, to me, this isn't about who's the most dynamic dual threat quarterback. It's about who gives us the best chance to win. And, you watch the Texas A&M game that they had late in the year. It was on the road at Kyle Field. And Ewers did some really good things early in the game, and then he struggled later in the game. There were a couple of red zone turnovers. But it wasn't like he came out of that and was like, okay, the job is open. I just think he has figured out this is the best way to work this for now. I mean, if you ask people who they think is the more talented quarterback, that might be a different question than who's the one who's right now the most ready to lead them to a national title. Now, look, if something happened where Ewers really struggled and Clemson got after him, and it was because once Sark made that move in the Georgia game, the first Georgia game, they were it was like an onslaught of that Texas offense, and Arch came in, gave him a little spark, but then all of a sudden it was like, Georgia basically reasserted itself. And then Ewers played a little better in the second half. It wasn't, it's opened the question to what we're talking about right now, for sure. Mm-hmm. But I have to believe Sark thinks the guy who gives us the best chance to win the national title. And it's not like, to me, there's like 4 or 5 teams that have a true chance to win the national title in this playoff field. And Texas is certainly one of them. I'm not saying they can't do it with Arch, but they can certainly do it with Ewers. Like, they were not far off last year. It's just he's probably got to play, a little cleaner than he has. But you could say the same about every quarterback. The only guy I would say I would have a lot more confidence in who's in this tournament is Dylan Gabriel. Now, he's not won a national title either, but I just think you can say the same about almost every quarterback here. And I think that there's probably even more questions at this stage of the game with Arch, where could you roll with him and just say, hey, he's going to be the guy going forward? It just doesn't line up with a lot of the things Sark has done and said so far.
So give me, Bruce Feldman, the lower seed with the best chance to upset, even though I don't know how you can call it an upset when everybody's made the college football playoff field of 12. But give me the road team with the best chance to win first weekend.
I think it's Indiana. You have a team with a really good run defense, statistically especially, going up against a Notre Dame team with a good running quarterback and 2 dynamic running backs. I don't think Curt Cignetti's team is going to, at this stage of the game, be really phased. And I also think, I don't know this, we'll find out, but when they played Ohio State, I felt like they got overwhelmed. They could not protect with the pressure that Jim Knowles' defense came at them. The running backs looked like they got overwhelmed in protection. I have to think that they took from that, in that environment, it's going to be similar. You know, it's obviously one's a day game, one's a night game, but similar in terms of, I think they will be more buttoned up to protect Curtis Rourke and not have a meltdown. They basically had a meltdown because the first, I don't know, I was at that game, the first like 30 minutes or 20 minutes of that game, they looked pretty good. Then all of a sudden they just fell apart. I think they will adjust and be a lot tight, cleaner and sharper. And I give them a chance. I don't think, unlike, while Notre Dame has a really, dangerous run game, and their backs certainly can be involved in the pass game, Ohio State has elite receivers. Notre Dame doesn't, So I just feel like this is a better matchup for Indiana. I don't think they're gonna. I'm not predicting they're going to win, but of the first weekend, that's to me the best chance of a big upset. The
second best chance then for a road team to win.
Well, I mean, Tennessee's really talented. It wouldn't feel like a huge upset to me if they won that game. They have a really nasty defense. They have a terrific running back in Dylan Sampson. They have a talented quarterback. Nico Iamaleava is 6'5", 6'6", can really run. He can throw on the run. It's just you don't know how he's going to play on a big stage. He's really inexperienced. Their offensive line is a better run blocking line than pass protecting. They've had some issues in that. And as we said a minute ago, Ohio State can get after you, and they will do a lot of stuff that can confuse the quarterback. So, and it's a tough spot. Like if you're Tennessee, you've played in big hostile environments. To me, that one feels like the most like that's the biggest heavyweight fight kind of feel for first round. But
Big Ten, SEC, 8 versus 9. So obviously the committee thought it would be somewhat of a coin flip as to
which Ohio State shows up. Is it the Ohio State that we just last saw where they looked really tight? I mean, I think there's a lot of soul searching that has gone on. And does Ohio State cut it loose and go, look, we can beat anybody if we play at our best? And
we're in that soul searching. You just mentioned, and rightfully so, Ohio State's wide receivers, and they were non-existent with the exception of that 2-minute drill to end the first half against Michigan, right? So what is the game plan? Do you think? Like, what Ohio State team will we see coming out on the other side of that dreadful loss at home against a blood rival that caused them to miss out on a Big Ten championship possibility and wind up in a position against a team like Tennessee at home? Like, what Ohio State team do you think we will see?
I think it's a different calculus than it was with Michigan, because for some reason it felt like, Ohio State was determined to be like, we're going to impose our will. They've challenged our manhood. We're going to be more physical. We're at all costs, we are going to run the football. It didn't feel like they trusted their quarterback to throw it, whether they do or not. It just didn't feel like
they better get over that and come in the college football playoffs, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the general, I'll tell you, man, that is the general sense, I've heard, certainly from a lot of folks in my maize and blue world. It's just like, and Charles Woodson, your colleague from Fox Sports, sat in that chair the day after it saying, it's obvious they don't trust Will Howard.
Yeah.
Based on the play calling, that 3rd and 10 call after they flipped they got a game-changing takeaway right there. It seemed like, what was that?
Really bad. Like, it happened right in front of me early in the game. He throws a bad pick inside their own 10, and he had a bad pick in his first throw against Penn State. It turned into a pick 6. Then he settled in. Against Ohio State, he really didn't settle in, and he got banged around some. And
against Michigan, you mean?
Against Michigan, right. Certainly. Now, I go back to this, and it's unfair to put this on Will Howard, but a couple of years ago, they had a similar deal. They had a really, gut punch of a loss against your alma mater in Columbus, And then they bounced back and went toe-to-toe and probably should have beat Georgia. Now, the big difference, this is why I say it's unfair to put this into Will Howard. They had C.J. Stroud. And C.J. Stroud, I don't want to say he played out of his mind. But
his game against Georgia was spectacular. That final drive to set up the game-winning field goal that they missed, spectacular.
But that is that kid. He's super accurate. He showed more mobility than people had seen from him. It's not to say he didn't have it.
Right.
But he was on top of his game against an NFL, as close as you get to an NFL defense you're going to get in college. Will Howard's a pretty good athlete, and he's big and strong. I don't think he throws it anywhere near like C.J. Stroud, but, pretty much nobody else does in college football either. He's a high-level guy in terms of accuracy and ball placement and all those other things. But Will Howard definitely has guys who are difference makers outside, and they have to find a way to get the ball to those guys. I mean, if they can't do that, and I'm not saying they won't be able to do that, but if they can't do that, then, they're not going to be able to win the playoff. But if they can, they have enough talent to beat anybody. But it's just like, what is the mindset? How do they build off it? Is it just the Michigan thing that's in their head where now that Michigan, they're not going to see Michigan in the playoff. And so it's a case where, look, what does it take for us to win this game? We do not need, like Ryan Day, when they were at their best, was a really good passing team that could run. But all of a sudden now, in that game, they were determined they had to outrush and out-physical and prove. Jim Harbaugh wasn't even in the building. They were they had to prove to Jim Harbaugh and everybody else, even whether they thought it or not. I feel like it was in their gut that they had to do that to exercise some demons, and it ended up blowing up in their face. I think if they just leave that, up from a month ago and just try to be the best Ohio State they can be and not try to be something that maybe they're probably not, they're going to beat a lot of teams, I think.
Well, the winner of this game takes on Oregon. What a hell of a Rose Bowl that would be.
Can't wait. I'm going to be at that
on New Year's Day in Pasadena in that beautiful spot. You get one more segment?
Yeah.
Let's take a break because I want to get your thoughts on Penix getting the gig in Atlanta. And then the whole question about the transfer portal. Being right in the middle of college football playoffs. It's insane, and we'll talk about that. Bruce Feldman from Fox Sports and The Athletic here on the Rich Eisen Show. I was going to talk portal with you, but that bores me. Bill Belichick, now that he is the HC of UNC, the biggest challenge for him is going to be what? What do you think?
Dealing with the chaos.
Which is what? What do you mean by that?
So look, no doubt, to me, greatest football coach in the history of the NFL. He's brilliant on all levels. But his buddy, Nick Saban, about a year ago at this time, walked away, bailed from college coaching because the day before when he told his team he was leaving and stepping down, he did 40-some exit interviews with his players and was disgusted by the stuff he was hearing. It's a lot of portal. It's a lot of free agency stuff or what's kind of in it for me, essentially. And he was like, I'm done with this. So now Bill Belichick's almost the same age, 72. He's going to jump into this. This is a guy who's so used to control and everything else. I think he'll do really well in his first year or two at North Carolina because he's a brilliant coach.
What does well look like to you?
Have them in the top 25, win 9 games. I mean, he's going into the ACC, not the SEC. So we just saw SMU in its first season make the playoff out of the ACC. You look at their last 5 recruiting classes, SMU was ranked 70th. Manny Diaz, first year at Duke, wins 9 games. Fran Brown, never been a coordinator, first year at Syracuse, wins 9 games. I think Bill Belichick can do that. It's not like he's taken over what Dion took over in Boulder. They were horrible. This program is in a bowl game. They have some players, but I think the first 2 years he'll do pretty well, and then I think he'll be sick of it and he'll be like, I'm done with this. I don't need this chaos. No. Because he can say, yeah, I know what it's like to deal with agents because he's in the NFL. He wasn't dealing with the agents he's going to be dealing with in college football. The people he was dealing with in the NFL, those were legitimate.
They're accredited.
They'd gone through a process. All it takes to be an agent in the NIL world is a smartphone and an internet connection. He will be dealing with, he can have Mike Lombardi and he can have a personnel department. They're still going to be coming to him.
Yeah.
It's and they're going to be coming to him with some really, really, some of them, really idiotic demands. And I think it will drive him crazy after 2 years because college football is total chaos. So you think he's gonna want to deal with all that stuff? You can talk about it's an NFL model and everything, that's great, but you're still gonna be dealing with 16, 17, 18-year-olds, the 16 and 17-year-old in the recruiting process, and then the other ones, I think he'll be good on the field, and I just think the other stuff will drive him away from it.
Okay. Last couple minutes here. Your thoughts on hearing Michael Penix Jr. is being handed the starter job, not handed, being asked to do what the Falcons need him to do this late in the season as the starting quarterback. What do you think of that?
First thoughts, I'm very happy for Michael. I mean, I got to know him, reasonably well in his time at UW and know what his journey was like. I mean, he was the guy who had a lot of adversity, more so than most guys who end up as first-round quarterbacks in the NFL. He had to face it. He overcame it, and it turned out to be kind of a virtue of how he battled through it. Mm-hmm. And he's really talented. I mean, he's got high-level arm talent. I hope it works out great for him as somebody who pulls for him after spending a bunch of time with him. So I think people looked at it and go, ooh, this is such a weird spot that they drafted him after they spent so much money on Cousins. But if he ends up flourishing in this spot, then it'll look like it's a shrewd draft pick because it's hard to find quarterbacks. I don't think there's anybody in this draft who's going to be as talented, can throw it like Michael Penix can.
How about that? Okay. So, and if he beats the Giants and the Eagles win and sweep the Commanders, these are two feasible scenarios in Week 16
Giants
for the NFL.
aren't very good, right?
Right. And then the Week 17 Sunday nighter that NBC just flexed into would be Penix versus Jaden Daniels, where the winner would essentially get a playoff spot.
Amazing. There's also, and I don't think Michael thinks this way, but it's the guy who beat him out for the Heisman.
That's right.
Jaden won the Heisman. Jaden had an amazing year. I mean, I actually voted for Penix first on my ballot because I just, that program was pretty terrible when Kalen DeBoer took it over, largely the same players. Right. It was Michael Penix Jr. that was the biggest difference in the roster. Couldn't say enough good things about him as a college player. Obviously, the NFL is a different world.
Sure. But they are going to face one another in front of the nation Sunday night of the penultimate week of the NFL season.
I will definitely be tuned in to see that.
Right? I mean, what a game, what a situation for Penix. And I was just saying before, to be born into the league the way that he was with that draft choice, and now to be born into this league as a starting quarterback under these circumstances, it's wild. It's positively wild. I've got this stat right here, the list of rookie quarterbacks in the history of the NFL to make multiple starts and then lead his team to the playoffs when his first start came in Week 10 or later for a team that's at 500 or below. The list of that is zero. It's never happened. And Penix is being asked to do that right now.
I'll say this again. He is over, our friend Daniel Jeremiah, we talked about quarterbacks who bust and who don't. And the biggest factor he said is the guys how they dealt with adversity. Because a lot of them, whether they were the 5-star guy at a high school or the Little 11 guy or whatever they were,
right.
They don't have the adversity that they get hit with in the NFL. A lot of them get hit with in the NFL. He had it because he had a bunch of injuries. People doubted him at Indiana. And he battled through it. And I think he came out the other side. And I think that will help him a lot. Now, that's
saying a lot. I know, but it means a lot. And that's Bruce Feldman here on the Rich Eisen Show. We still are on the Roku channel for about another minute and a half. It really is amazing how that's coming to the fore right now for Penix. Okay, so you think Indiana has the best chance just to kick things off to come out with a road win, and then after that it would be Tennessee?
Look, I should be saying SMU because I think there's a lot of people who are skeptical of Penn State. I was probably reading them in maybe too much on how their offense looked as dynamic and explosive as it did against Oregon in the Big Ten title game. But these are the kind of matchups where I feel like Penn State, when they're punching, I don't want to say punching down, but when they're not facing
punching up.
Yeah,
in a clear manner.
I feel like James Franklin is more comfortable. I feel like they are at their best. It's going to be a really, amazing atmosphere there in Happy Valley. It's going to be really cold. I'm not saying SMU can't handle cold, but I don't know. Maybe I'll be wrong, but I think Penn State will respond. I mean, they have two elite running backs who are really good in the pass game. They have a really versatile tight end. Their quarterback, I think, is playing with a lot of confidence. Mm-hmm. That doesn't even speak to the top 5 pick they may have on the other side of the ball as in Abdul Carter. So I like Penn State this weekend.
Yeah, SMU, Penn State, Clemson, and Texas on TNT and Max that you could see right here on the Roku portal. And then the first game of the week, Indiana, Notre Dame, and then also the Tennessee-Ohio State game you can see on ABC and ESPN. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.